Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today, the topic will center on mental health, as it so often does. But today, we're going to talk about what happens once a man or boy says that something is wrong and asks for help. Pull up a stump and join us. And yes, thank you all for joining us. And Dead Duck, thank you for joining me.
No worries.
Um, and as I mentioned in the title, this is something that's kind of been on my plate quite a bit recently. Just that the probably most common complaint about men, and boys, and our behavior and our vulnerabilities, as they would call it, or our struggles, I think, as we would call it, is getting us to the place where we finally do admit that something is wrong and that we can't fix it ourselves. It's something wrong, in our heads, in our hearts, in our behavior, in our outlook.
Mm.
And when a man, certainly a boy, gets to the place where you know where we reach out for help, and we, I guess, from that perspective, admit that something is wrong. From our
Mm.
own perspective, just admit that something is wrong, and ask for help about it because we realize we can't fix it ourselves. It seems like, everyone just kind of throws a party and assumes that, that man or that boy is, on their way to wellness, and everything's going to be okay, and it's all going to be fixed by Thursday, et cetera, et cetera. And my own experience, certainly, and the experience of the uh, company of men that I keep who do, you know, uh, and have admitted that something is wrong and that they need help, that experience is very different from that.
Mm.
None of it's over with by Thursday, and none of it is it doesn't come out as an expression of confidence, that, okay, now, I know I've got to do something, and I know I'm gonna be working with somebody else to do something about it, and here we go.
Mm.
It really isn't like that. um and that, the people that spend so much time, frankly, some very aggressively demanding, that we seek help, right? And that we I don't know, do the work, as they say, to get better. I don't think they have a clear understanding of what that means to us. I mean, for some, especially much younger men, it's very simply, uh, embarrassment and a sense of shame, right? That they have to overcome in order for any kind of therapy to do any good, right? I mean, it's
Mm.
one thing, for me to hang my head and slump my shoulders and just say, yeah, you're right. I'm a screw up, and nothing I do is right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's not productive, right?
No.
That won't move the ball forward. But something has to happen, right?
Mm.
And we don't give really anybody very much clear, and hopeful, and supportive direction on how to beat that, you know
Yeah.
on how to what the cheat code is to avoid feeling shame over the thing, that is needed in order to correct a problem that's only going to get worse.
Mm.
And like I said, in recovery, there's I guess, real great confidence in the the addicted person hitting bottom. And I do understand that very clearly. One thing
Mm.
about hitting bottom is that there's a lot more humiliation and a lot more shame around the results, the losses and the damage done, that
mm,
it's not embarrassing, it's shameful, right?
yeah,
And so uh it doesn't add very much more shame to that whole mess to just say, I can't do anything about this.
mm,
I'm done. I can't fix it.
yeah,
And it looks like if it doesn't get fixed, that it's going to kill me. You know,
yeah,
so that makes, like I say, in a very kind of like gruesome way, that makes it easy. That makes it so that everybody is right away on the same page. But there's a lot of other struggles and a lot of other vulnerabilities,
mm,
that we as men and boys go through that don't involve trying to drink or drug ourselves to death. You
yeah,
know, I mean that's a an aberration, that doesn't affect all of us, right?
mm,
But other things do, you know. And I don't get to meet very many men who just completely negotiate all those terms with no trouble,
mm,
and uh, until the general public, including the men that are affected, can say there is no shame in this, and this is not an humiliation, but this is a difficult and necessary, and long-term project, you know, to get involved with, that, like I said, will never be successful if it's a one-person project.
mm,
Again, in the uh, recovery world, there's a real old saying that says, you can't use a broken mind to fix a broken mind.
mm,
It can't be done. And, you know, being especially clever, and being especially resourceful, and intelligent, if anything, makes it worse. You know,
yeah,
again, another old trope is, very, very often, you will meet somebody trying to get sober that's just a little too smart, but it's very rare, that it's somebody that's not smart enough,
mm,
right? Usually the one that, I guess, in the Bible it says to have the faith of a child, is effective. It
mm-hmm,
works, right? But let's face it, most guys don't have the mind of a child. They've got men have the mind of an adult man.
mm,
And whether it's addiction or depression, or the organic disorders like bipolar, or schizophrenia, right, or autism, the ones that are just about the wiring, right? Um, you know, Unfortunately, cleverness and the support of the community for being clever, and resourceful and productive at the expense of the suffering, right? It doesn't work. The person maybe gets all kinds of pats on the back and all kinds of congratulations. What they don't get is better.
yeah,
And this is one of those things that, it rests on the shoulders of the collective,
mm,
which I'm not uh, I really don't like leaving things in the hands of the collective because they tend to take it and run off the end of the earth with it. But
yeah,
sometimes that's what the play calls for, and this is one of them. So
yeah.
anyway, Dad, what do you think?
Oh, I think one of the tropes around mental health and in particular suicide statistics is that if men just started to cry more, and be open and emotive and everything else, they would all feel an awful lot better. And then you have to point out to people that women do all those things and are more likely to attempt suicide. So, we need to reframe the discussion around things like suicide when it comes to mental health. And there is obviously this stigma around mental health, particularly with men, but it doesn't help when the people that men should be able to rely on to take possession of something so sacred to them as their mental health and emotional well-being are the people that men cannot actually trust to take care of it. Or there are very, very few examples. And those, for the most part, are the women in men's lives. I'm fortunate in that I now have a woman in my life who I can give my mental health or mental well-being to and trust her with it so that it is protected and is sacred and is not going to be turned against me. But I'm in the minority,
Yeah.
as you are yourself with the things that have worked for you. I'm
Right.
not, as you've said in conversations about this before, I'm not the rule and the exception. Do not
Right.
try in any way, shape, or form to use me as the rule. It will
Right.
fail with
Right.
deadly consequences.
Absolutely. And the irony is, and you may have experienced this yourself, with your current partner, um, trying to even convince them, what a rare item they are,
Mm,
you know, because it kind of sounds like, just being uh, overly complimentary, basically just telling them they're very special,
mm,
which is true, they are. But two things about that. One is, to be special means that, people will rely on you for things that they don't rely on others for.
mm-hmm,
It's not so much a compliment as it is a burden.
mm-hmm,
And the other thing about it is, because of all that, these people, in fairness to them, they don't want to think about the fact that most of the, like in the case of women, most women can't do what they're doing,
mm,
and I say can't because a person is never able to do something like that until they really want to.
mm,
you know it's like if it's only half-hearted or it's only performative, I'm sure that in your own relationship with her, it would take you about 5 minutes to figure out that you were being played if she wasn't sincere.
mm,
And it's like, this is uh just an element of the human condition. It's
mm,
nobody's fault. It's just, this is the way it works out. You can't perform an inauthentic support for somebody else's real vulnerability and real weaknesses.
mm,
Either you do it because you mean it, or you're better to just not do it at all. And when I came back out of the cold and dark and just determined that I was going to get better and or die trying, and I didn't care who thought what about me in the process.
mm,
It was still just blind stupid luck that I found people, that not only did they understand that, yeah, they were a little bit special, but they took particular responsibility for it.
yeah.
And they didn't try to convince me that I was wrong all along. And most people, specifically most women, are like them. They
Mm,
readily admit, you're like, yeah, Taz, you're right. They don't do that, you
mm,
know and I'm sorry, and I'm doing the best I can over here, but it's like, I can't fix that. you know
yeah.
it's like, yeah, you're right, you can't. you know
Yeah.
um but it's like, I tell people who want these same people, I encourage them when they say, we we think you are a model of, uh, recovery for men. I mean, not just from addiction, but trauma and suicide and depression and all of it. I say, well, I'm kind of like you. I'm like, I don't recommend that, you know,
Mm.
because I think you might kill a few people that way. But I
Yeah.
said, for within, your own community, use yourselves as models, you
Mm.
know, and just tell them, do what I do, and learn how to want to do what I do,
Mm.
you know? Or get out, go dig ditch or whatever, like go like work in an office or something, because this is not the right job for the uncommitted, and they're right, it's not.
Mm.
um I tell I've told some of my therapists, I said, because you all are the ones who work successfully with uh male survivors of trauma, and male survivors of addiction, depression, etc., is because you're willing to do that, and you've got that particular talent, like because you have that. um you're like working in a nitroglycerin factory, right?
Mm-hmm.
The it's great stuff, and it's capable of helping people be really productive, and do things they would not be able to do otherwise. But all you have to do is sneeze wrong and the whole block goes up,
Yeah.
and it's all over with. Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, you guys know that, and there's a lot of people in that field, I think they don't, they don't quite see it that way. Like if
Yeah.
they feel like if they have some kind of a formula, when I say magic spell, some magic words to say that it's going to work every time,
Mm.
and you're trying to deal with the parts of, a man at least, and I would say really anybody, but especially a man or a boy, and his heart, his like soul, that all you have to do is say the wrong thing at the wrong time without thinking about it, and that young man or boy going to have to start over again, and they might not want to.
Yeah.
I know, for me, if that had happened to me, I don't know if this conversation be taking place. I was in a very bad way, and I was just about a hair's breadth from giving up.
Yeah.
And when I started, here's the punchline. It's like when I started all that, I hadn't had a drink in over 8 months, you know,
Yeah.
and I had a job, right? Finally, and I had a place to live, like an actual apartment I was renting,
Mm-hmm.
and I had some friends, right? And I had some people, some community, and I was still at a place where, like, I got this one last thing that's still on my plate. If I can't get rid of it, I'm finished here. I'll walk
Yeah.
away from all of this, and like I say, I know all too well, the feeling. And again, it's, I hate to keep gendering it, but it does seem to be about that most of the time, for a man, what that condition is like,
Mm.
you know. And it's like the weird part is, you're not mad at anybody anymore, right?
Mm.
The anger and the bitterness is gone, and honestly, so is the fear,
Yeah.
but there's a few people that can recognize that, yeah, the fear is gone and the anger is gone, and the person is being reasonable. um, but what they still have is a big fat chunk of despair and shame,
Mm.
and if we can't deal with that, then nothing else I do is going to help.
Yeah. It's quite scary when somebody who's been in a really dark place for a really long time somebody suddenly seems very, very calm, because that's dangerous. That's very dangerous. That can be a sign that they've made the decision to do something drastic. I would rather somebody be angry than nothing. I'd rather have to deal with somebody's anger over
Right.
something, whether that be a man who's recently divorced
Mhm.
and is coming to terms with it and is angry about it. Say, for instance, they've been cheated on and
Mhm.
they're angry and what have you. I've seen that. I'd
Right.
rather they be that than calm, because the
Yeah.
calmness is scary.
Yeah. It's an indicator a decision's been made.
Mhm.
I mean, it really is one thing for however long, for someone, and again, specifically a man, to struggle and fail and cope, and hide from all this pain and everything. But that's an indicator that, they're unhappy because they still want to be here, but here doesn't want them as they are,
Mhm.
you know. But, all that kind of goes away when that person says, I don't know if, the community wants me or not, but I really don't want it anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, how do you talk somebody out of that? You know,
I, I've had to do it a couple of times on the Men Are Human Discord
Mhm.
with young boys, actually, or not young, quite young boys, but
Right,
teenage boys.
right.
And that's it's not a pleasant thing to have to do,
No,
you know.
no,
And that as a father,
sure.
that triggers things psychologically that maybe you wouldn't have not being a father,
Right,
because there's no doubt at all that fatherhood changes a man.
right.
There's psychological literature on it. There's biological literature on it.
Yeah,
Biological studies, psychological
yeah,
studies
yeah.
that show men fundamentally change when they become father,
Right.
and it does. Does it negatively impact your mental health?
I'm sure there are days.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose so. But they're fleeting moments. You know, I wouldn't change being a father for anything in the world.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. You all
and
tell me that. You know.
there have been times when I've been in a very dark place,
Right.
very dark, and I tried it at one point and I couldn't go through with it.
Yeah.
I couldn't put the children through that.
Yeah. Yeah. This is one of those, I guess, rationales, that uh, I use, to stay involved, in men's advocacy. Even though a lot of the time, I have to put my own issues aside in favor of being able to focus on the issues that fathers are dealing with, because as you mentioned, I can go so far into reacting, I guess, as a father would when I'm trying to help somebody, but there's a limit, because
Mm,
I'm not a father, right? And I'm not going to be one,
mm,
So there's parts of that experience, and parts of that, parts of the soul, that you have that I don't,
hmm
and that you'll always have, and I never will, you know.
I
Yeah,
think it's there. It's just it's been cultivated.
yeah. I mean,
Whereas
it's not,
for
or
you,
it
it's
didn't just happen.
no.
Yeah,
For you, that part is just the seed. For me, it's a fully grown flower.
right. And so I make use of it. I was like, it's
Mm,
there and it helps. So cool.
mm,
But like I said, I mean, I tell people that, well, therapists, that work with me, they'll ask me, like, how I got good at verbalizing what I'm going through, talking it out. And I've had to say, well, some of it is that I don't share all the experiences that most other men share, you
Mm,
know, and so it for me it's not it doesn't just come with the outfit, as you say,
mm,
I have to cultivate it,
mm,
I got to work on it, and part of that is thinking. And when people think, there's like this voice in their head, and I just use those words, right? Well, and for uh, for a lot of fathers, even, and I think you've heard me or seen me do this. I will have to say out loud, you know, you as a father, are you still confident being able to look a young man in the eye and recommend that he become a father?
mhm,
You know, because I mean, let's face it, and of course they always say yes, but it's like they don't. I have to ask that question because
mm.
if I don't ask that question, they'll never say it out loud.
Yeah.
It's just sort of an unwritten rule and an unspoken assumption. But when then I say, well, okay, I'll just turn it into a question. I'll just say, is this what you would do? Is this
Mm,
what you would say? Um, and when I do, um, one of our people in our other group, I put it to him. There's always this moment, where you kind of look at his face and it's like, I never really thought of it that way before. Right? There's
mm,
a pause, you know, and when I tell people uh, about consequences,
mm,
I'll say things like, you know, for these guys, right? For men like you and him and all the other fathers out there, what if someday the answer is no?
mm,
It's like, now what? How do you undo that, right?
mm.
Because by then, people constantly challenge me about saying, don't wait until it's too late. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
When it hits that point, it's too late.
Yeah.
There's one thing about they tell me about being a father is it seems to be something you really want to do.
Mhm.
You know, and when that stops happening, something has been broken that I think we can't repair.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd agree with that. And unfortunately, as a consequence of so much of what we see, more and more men are saying it's not worth it. And
Right.
that's a worrying trend. I don't like, we've said this so many times, don't like it,
Mm-hmm.
but I completely understand it.
Right.
If my son
Right.
came to me tomorrow and said, Dad, I don't want to find myself in a situation like you've been in,
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to say, well, you know what, boy, don't get married and don't have children.
Right. Like I
Or
said,
back
it's
to the other
one.
team.
Yeah,
You know?
something,
Yeah.
but it's one thing, for especially a young man, to say to himself or anybody that asks, it doesn't seem as though fatherhood is a good idea anymore.
Mm,
That's one thing. But like I said, for the one who is a father,
hmm
and who has been a successful father to get to the point, where you, for example, would say, things have changed enough that you're not going to be able to do what I've done, no
Yeah.
matter, uh, no matter how, slick you are, it's not going to work for you.
Mm,
You and like I said, that I don't think we're quite there yet, but more and more, even among fathers of adult children,
mm,
at least the conversation is being had. And it's like, most people are like, oh, goody, the people are talking about this, and I'm like, that should terrify you.
yeah.
People are actually, discussing the fathers of adult children are actually discussing the merits of fatherhood in the company of young men that are not yet fathers.
Hmm.
You know, and it's like, I didn't grow up with that. This
Yeah.
was, just assumed. Maybe that's not good, but that's the way it was. You will grow up and become an adult man, and part of that will be being a husband and a father.
Hmm.
It's not negotiable. Nowadays, it's not only is it negotiable, it's considered a high risk investment.
Mm.
You know,
I think it's always been a high risk investment,
hmm,
but the reward for the risk was greater because you
yeah,
were rewarded with loyalty, love,
right.
respect,
Respect. Yep.
maybe
Yeah,
even admiration.
sure.
And the ultimate reward was seeing your children go out into the world
Right.
as well adjusted, balanced human beings.
Right.
And a lot of that has been destroyed.
Yep.
And, it's not really the topic of the conversation we're having tonight, but a lot of the role of the father has been destroyed by the machinations of certain political interests.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have we seen in the press and what have you, our fathers really needed?
Yeah.
Um, do you really want an answer to that question? I mean, do you remember or have you seen the news article from Louisiana a couple of like year ago?
Hmm. What was it?
It was there's been some trouble in this one high school in Louisiana, I think it was.
Hmm.
Kids fighting, not going to class, just general disruption. It was a
Hmm.
powder keg waiting to explode.
Hmm.
And the dads went in there and they started hanging around at the school in the corridors, outside the gates. Everything stopped.
Hmm.
All the trouble just come to an end all of a sudden
Right.
because the dads were there, and they weren't necessarily. It wasn't none of this iron fist
Right.
in an iron gauntlet type of thing. It was
Right.
a velvet glove with iron inserts, I suppose.
Right. Because they were there.
Yeah, they were there,
Yeah.
they were present. And
Yeah.
there was a you'd listen to them talking to the kids and there'd be like Mickey taking but
Hmm.
a sternness in the tone that's like come on kiddo,
Hmm.
class now kind of
Right.
effort.
Right.
Unless you want to end up working in some bottom end job,
Hmm.
which is
Yeah.
thankless and everything else.
Yeah.
Get yourself to class kind of effort. And
Right.
they were interviewing some of the children. I say children; these were youngish adults.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were talking about the presence of these fathers within the school. And there's
Hmm.
one girl. She was saying, "Have you ever heard of a look?" And the person doing the interview was saying, "Well, what's that about?" It's, your father just gives you this look, and
Right.
you just know that, yeah, you've overstepped the mark there.
Right.
Crack on, kind of effort. And the reporter turned and said, "Fathers can do that." I'm thinking,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, this is
Yeah.
how wrong we have gone. Well, we don't.
Yeah.
This is completely off topic for what we're trying to discuss tonight. But
No, it's right in the middle of it, man.
um, you know, we've
Really.
gotten to the stage where we don't realize the importance of fathers in particular when it comes to things like discipline.
Hmm.
You know, if with my children, I had to be hard when they were younger, particularly when I was still living with them. I had to be the hard ass because that now, at the ages that they are, when my son's coming to the end of his compulsory education, my daughter's now reach high school age. By that I mean UK high school rather than US high school.
Right.
Um, I don't need to do that anymore.
Hmm.
And both my children know that A, their mum's going to talk to me if there's a problem, but B, what I say goes.
Right.
And that
Right.
if they do disobey me, they might be told that I'm extremely disappointed in the fact that they've gone against me, disobeyed what I told them to do, and what have you. Or they might get an absolute rocket. you know, I I was having
Right.
a discussion. I was talking to my son one night on the phone a week or two ago, and he had a right attitude on him. And I must have warned him 2 or 3 times. Drop
Yeah.
the attitude. I'm not the one.
Yeah.
This isn't going to end well for you. And he
Right.
kept on, and then I just absolutely went off at him. I went
Mhm.
full dad voice. I think that the people driving past, I was parked on a lay-by at the time. I think the people driving past must have heard me. And he went quiet as a mouse.
Right.
His tone completely changed. And I
Right.
rang him up about 2 hours later, and it was a completely different kid. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I've not had a problem with him since. Um, the early years after his mum and I separated, he was more difficult to deal with for her.
Yeah.
But now he's reached a point I don't really think he cares, to be quite honest with you. But you know, both kids sort of understand that not quite I am the law, but behave yourself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a conversation unfortunately I've had to have with my ex-wife on so many occasions
Yeah.
because she'll complain about the children's behaviour with her. Oh, well,
Mhm.
they don't behave with you like that. No, because they knew full well I will not put up with it.
Right.
And one of her forms of, I suppose you'd call it abuse, was to call me out in front of the children when I was disciplining them,
Mhm.
and was to cut my legs out at the knees
Right.
because she didn't like the way I did something. It's like, well, okay, you deal with it. No, I don't
Right.
want to. Right? Well, you can't have this both ways. You either let me deal with the children. If you've got a problem with the way I'm doing things, you speak to me afterwards.
Right. Right.
But she's one of, despite the fact that she's outside of her 40s now,
Mhm.
she's one of these early adopters of the modern woman's attitude of being the boss babe and everything.
Yeah.
I'm in charge. I don't, well, and yeah, these women who say they don't need a man, no, you don't, but your children bloody well do.
Right.
They
Right.
need that, strong masculine influence
Right.
because one thing that we do as fathers is teach them right from wrong,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
And I say to my children, you can have the father that used to pick you up and throw you around the house and play wrestle you and do everything else, or you can have the other one, which is emotionally detached from you and is very sort of sharp and isn't nice to be around.
Right.
You
Yeah.
misbehave, you get the latter.
Right.
You behave, you get the former.
Right. Right.
And more often than not, they want the former. So unfortunately, sometimes children do need the latter. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. A
so
long time ago, I read an article, and again, because I'm not a father myself, but I hear tell, that whole process, for young children, um, they need and at least unconsciously appreciate, having the fun, playful father available to them,
mhm,
and it's more of an incentive to be well behaved than fear of punishment, because you know that Father A is a lot of fun,
mhm,
and there is, like able to be with them in a way that mom isn't always able to be with them,
yeah,
you know. And it's worthwhile. And then the other end of the process, like where your kids are, getting ready to go into the world or just about to go into the world, and they don't like constantly need to you know goof off and play catch with dad, but at the
mm,
same time they don't you know they don't try to meet your standards as much out of a fear of how you'll be if they don't, as just the simple fact that they see the wisdom of it.
mm,
And one of the very few good things about the rise of social media is just an unending number of examples of you know children and young adults who don't have that,
yeah,
and people like our friend, the tall lady, and a lot of our other friends that are young people, young adults, and your own kids. All they got to do is spend 5 minutes on TikTok and Twitter and say, no matter what else happens, and no matter what I got to put up with, the one thing at all costs I don't want to be is anything like that,
Yeah.
because that just looks awful,
Hmm.
you know, and they feel like it looks awful because it's awful.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so you're right. This is crap,
Yeah.
and it's like uh, gives them a chance to be grateful, and appreciative of this guy who is who can either be fun loving and good natured and relaxed and fun to be around, or stern and unyielding, and loaded with standards and boundaries.
Mm.
And they tell me, especially for daughters, not having that, means that they seem to most often gravitate toward relationships with men, that have none of that, right?
Yeah.
And they tell me they are very unhappy, and I believe them,
Yeah. I don't like going on to the social media thing for a minute. I see
Mhm,
so many of these channels within sort of the red pill sphere of things. Because you and I are both red pilled, but
mhm.
to us, the red pill means something very, very different to
Right,
what it's being
right,
portrayed as in social media.
right.
Um,
We're not looking to get dates.
no, no, it's not even that. We're not looking to point at young women and go, ha ha, or,
Yeah,
you've slept with 300 men, therefore
right,
you're useless and everything else.
right.
If I was in that position, I'd say to them, go ahead and sleep with as many men as you want, but do not expect to get the man you want to marry you.
Right.
That's a simple consequence of your own actions.
Right.
Something else we've moved away from because of the lack of fatherhood or
Hmm.
lack of fathers being in children's lives for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Is there's no understanding of the consequences of your own actions. But I watch so many of these young girls or young women on these channels, and I wonder how many of them actually had a good relationship with their father. I really do.
Probably not very many of them.
Yeah.
You know,
And
I
it's a big
when
difference,
oh,
personal experience here
yeah.
between my ex and my partner. My
Mhm,
partner speaks with such warmth and longing for her father, who's long since departed. And my ex speaks about it, but in a different kind of way.
mhm.
My partner, because she misses it deeply.
Right.
My ex, because she never really had it. She
Yeah.
doesn't really know what that meant to have that kind of relationship.
Yeah.
But her father was a World War II veteran.
Hmm.
My ex-wife was born out of an extramarital affair that he'd had, long-term
Hmm.
extramarital affair, and he was never really around for her in the way that she needed. But then he was also very, very broken, I would have thought,
Right. Right.
taking it back to
And
the mental health thing. But
you know, oh,
he
go
never got
ahead.
to the point of saying, I'm broken, help.
Right. And when like in these around these other campfires, for the women, when when I am as open and vulnerable and tender as I can be, then they'll do the same for me. And time and again, in one form or another, they'll refer to this. Uh, I guess pop psychologists call it father wound. The wound, either from I guess I'm not really sure, either from involvement that they that didn't support them, or no involvement at all. And it's like I feel real pain coming from that, and I empathize with it, obviously, in my own way, for a lot of reasons. But the hard part is like the hard part of the conversation is that, to, I guess, bring them back to the present, you know, and on one hand, let them know that this this wound, this broken thing is just wreaking every kind of havoc in here in 2023, you know. But on the other hand, to be positive and hopeful enough to say, you know, there is something we can do about it, right? There is something that can be done so that, it isn't just an open wound anymore. Even if it's only a scar, even if it's only a dead place, because I have plenty of those, right? But to make some use of the parts that are still alive, and like your ex is probably a really good example of that, that instead of just forever having that wound, run and fester and hurt and bleed, to take whatever steps are necessary to heal it, and if nothing else, make it a scar and then make some use of whatever's left, and yet most people are pleasantly surprised. There's a lot left,
Mm.
you know. There's a lot of things, about me that are still, like functional,
Mm.
and of some use, not just to me, but to, people in general. And, it's like uh, one of the healing elements is to recognize that, I've kind of wanted to do that all along.
Mm.
Right? It's like I skipped a lot of years just not doing that, and just letting that same wound bleed and fester and, swell and turn red and hurt and, sap all my strength, you
Mm.
know. Um, to use the metaphor of a wound, I guess. The thing is, it's something that needs to be attended. For your ex, for for all of these women that I've had these kind of conversations with, certainly for all of the men that have been uh, disfigured in spirit that way. It's not that's not the end of the story if you don't want it to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I guarantee you it becomes the end of the story for way too many of us.
Hmm.
It just, that's the last chapter, was this wound happened a way long time ago. I've been living with it ever since. And, in a lot of cases, I'm just not going to live with it anymore. You
Hmm.
know, it just hurts, just one day too many of that kind of pain.
Yeah.
But point is, it doesn't have to end that way. But if people like us don't make it clear that it doesn't have to end that way and it's worth it, to make it not end that way, then
Mm.
why shouldn't they? It's like if people need an incentive to do that kind of work, whether it's, an embittered and disappointed and lonely and angry woman, or, a hopeless, homeless, dangerous man,
Mm.
you know, because they
Mm.
out there, they're, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, good things can be done with them and they can do good things, but it doesn't come for free,
No.
and it doesn't come uh you know it doesn't come with a guarantee that all of this horror in your past is just going to be wiped away. It doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't.
No. And when people say, this is, something extraordinary about me, that I managed to get there and still function and not jump off a bridge, or whatever. Then I say, I know, but um, if it, and this is usually people that have been there the whole time, like supporting me and helping me and cheerleading me, I'll look at them and say, maybe it is extraordinary, but I guarantee you, if you weren't there every step of the way, I wouldn't have done it,
Mm.
and I wouldn't
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have had a reason to,
Yeah.
so
See,
you,
there's a lot of discussion to be had, not just about fatherhood, but mental mental health in particular. I mean, one thing I think we are quite good at in the UK is having our people responsible for writing entertainment and fiction
yeah,
quite often have their finger on the pulse of an issue.
yeah,
There has
yeah,
been over the last 5 years, I suppose,
mhm,
a real push by those working in the entertainment field to try to get, in particular, the issue around men's mental health or the stigmas around men's mental health
yeah,
out. But I think also some of the stigmas have only really built up in the last 50 or 60 years. Feminists and all that can talk about equality as much as they want. By removing male only spaces from our societies, what they have done is doomed men. And you cannot then, therefore, sit there and tell me that these movements were just about equality.
right,
Because when men had their own spaces, they were safe to be able to be open with what
mhm,
was going on. By taking those spaces away, you put them in a situation where they were no longer able to be open. And therefore, in the end, the only solution was final.
yeah, yeah, because it's this false dichotomy that
Mm,
everything is only about politics and economics, and a long time ago when I was first getting started, getting better, and I was still pretty like rizzed up. I was not a happy little fella,
hmm
and I looked I looked at my therapist, and I said, um, you know do you think it's my politics that are screwed up? I didn't have to ask about the economics because I was broke. You know, I was jobless and didn't have no money. You
Yeah.
know, thankfully, when I first started seeing her, she was with a charitable organization and could do it for free. But politics wise, I said, is this, do I just have the wrong politics? And she's like, no, this is not a political issue.
Mm,
Right? There is no place for political debate on this side of the door.
hmm
And I said, well, I mean, what are yours? And she's like, that don't matter,
mm,
And then later on, long or a while later, I said, for all I know, you could be like, a like radical militant sign waving feminist. And she looked at me and she said, yeah, I could, but you're never gonna know.
Fair play.
Now, of course, over this length of time, I can assure you she is not.
Yeah.
She is nothing like that.
Yeah.
But the point is that I didn't get to that by political discussion, and I
hmm
didn't I didn't get there by her trying to re-engineer me to some correct politics. She let me have the ones that I had,
hmm
um, and said, I'm going to be able to help you anyway. Right now, the kind of people you're talking about, that they just can't countenance the idea that, there's a lot of life and a lot of social order, especially between men and women, just plain cisgendered heterosexual men and women that cannot successfully be political.
mm,
And I tell people, I wish it could,
mm.
I do, because that would really make it easy, and would probably make it a lot more safe.
Yeah.
It's not like that, and it's never going to be. We can't unperson ourselves to the point where we don't need these non-political, non-economic components to our life.
Mm.
And that's just the way it goes, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and the sooner people come to grips with that, and you know, uh, like I say, openly and honestly negotiate it, the sooner we can stop having these kinds of conversations. Like I
Yeah.
say, the sooner this whole mess will become ridiculous.
Well, I mean, to you and I, this whole mess is ridiculous anyway,
It is. It is.
but that's
You know,
because we're red pilled. And we
right.
understand
Right.
that, you know, we are
It's
actually red pilled, not
right.
using this
Yeah.
as some kind of bizarre ideology. We are.
Right. Right. It's just, awareness, right?
Yeah.
All it is a particular kind of awareness that I believe originates, from a person knowing themselves very well,
Mm,
warts and all, right?
yeah.
And then refusing, to try to, I guess, enforce that, self knowledge on the rest of the world.
Hmm.
You know, that I can know myself, as the old saying goes, and know myself well enough, that I don't have to project it onto the rest of the world. I don't have to
Mm,
project it on you. I don't have to project it on my other friends. You don't have to see all of this stuff the same way I do. And I realized that when I realized how unreasonable people were being with me,
mm,
especially people trying to help me. There's like, here's what it costs, and we will help you. As long as you rewire your brain to our liking.
yeah.
And this is where, I mean, but one man's opinion, this is where things like the churches have always failed.
Mm,
This is where politics and social science always seems to fail. And this is where all too often psychology and social service therapy tends to fail.
mm,
Is you, you're not, or it's unwise to try to do this in order to produce a finished product. you
hmm.
know and again, the I guess selfish part of me wishes there could be a finished product. Wishes that I could have been remade into something, that everyone was expecting. As in my, I was like, I'd be able to like buy a nice house and drive a nice car just with the money I would have saved. you
Mm,
know it just doesn't work that way. you know
no,
and
I
the
think.
more, like, somebody that I've been chatting in Discord with, that was asking me about the cuddle therapy that I do. I encouraged him to look into it. And of
Mm,
course it didn't work out the way I would have expected, and it didn't work out the way that I would have wanted. But the good news is, who gives a crap what I want?
yeah,
It's his life.
yeah,
you know, and if he's happy and if it did him some good, then my best bet is shut my mouth.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Thing is, people are an awful lot different from objects, aren't they? Let's be
I
honest.
know, I know.
You can fix an object and come out with with something that looks
Yeah,
like the object.
yeah,
With
yeah,
people, you can't do that. You're not gonna. A person with very severe trauma, mental health problems, and everything else is never going to be fixed.
right, right.
And to those people who may be listening to this, I know that sounds hopeless, but it's just being realistic.
It
If
is.
your whole reason to go to therapy is to be fixed, the chances are it's not going to work.
No, no.
If you're going there to try to understand whatever issue you have and how to best process it,
Yeah,
I suppose, to the
to
point
heal.
where yeah, to heal from that, but knowing that you're never going to be what you were before the trauma happened, i.e.,
Right,
be fixed,
right.
then therapy could work. It
Yeah,
might well work. not a
Yeah.
guarantee. And we're obviously talking about the traditional talk therapy here.
Right.
And this is another reason why I see this whole rhetoric around, just teach men how to talk. Well, yeah, we do, but who's listening? Really?
Yeah.
This is another thing, see, is who's listening.
Right.
Is it the right person or the wrong person?
Right. I know,
Men,
like you and I both kind of take this approach that it is important for us to listen,
mhm,
when men and boys come to us. And it
mhm,
is important, to like, they say, well, listen without judgment. What that really means, boots on the ground, is listen and think, as best we can, um, you know, like what information they're really looking for, and what words will they be able to use. Very
mm,
often, if I'm talking to a man or a boy trying to be helpful, I cannot very often just tell them, here's what worked for me, and just leave it at that. I
mm,
I can tell them, here's something that worked for me, just to, give them some hope. But then I'll follow it up, saying, based on what you've told me, I would look at, this, and this, right?
mm,
Which might have nothing to do with me,
yeah,
you know, and wouldn't do anything for me, but it might help them,
mm,
and that's, I won't be able to do any of that if I don't hear everything they have to say first.
yeah. And
Um,
there's also the difference between hearing and listening.
right, right.
A very
Um,
big difference.
um,
It's,
I,
and there's
it is.
also something I want the women to take away is if you've got a husband or boyfriend or brother, son, whatever, who's going through something,
Mm,
it's not even necessarily about the words that you use in response. Sometimes the best thing you can do, the only thing that is really going to help in the moment is a touch.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's something, it's magical thing that women have that they just don't understand, I don't think, is the lightness of touch as well. A
yeah,
simple just touch of the arm or the hand or whatever, nothing sexual, nothing like that.
yeah,
But that lightness just lets the man know that you're there.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
if your ladies, if your husband, boyfriend, whatever, trusts you enough to be completely open with you, then you have to know how to use that touch to let him know you understand. You're there.
yeah,
You're not going anywhere.
yeah,
And it's, again, I'm just speaking from personal experience. It's something my partner gets so right so often. And I had an incident with her a couple of months ago. I was just not feeling it. Not the relationship, but I just wasn't doing great for
yeah,
whatever reason.
yeah,
And I went to her and I said, I think I'm fighting with depression here again. And she went, yeah, I know. That was it. That's all she did.
yeah,
And sometimes I can have an absolute stinker at work in a week. I'll come home and it'll just be a hug and that's it. No words.
mm,
Nothing needs to be said. Just give me a hug.
yeah, yeah,
When my mum died, I'm sure I probably told you this story before. When mum died, we did the round trip to Kent and back,
mhm,
which was a 400-mile round trip. Um, I went. I have this thing where if something bad happens, like really bad, is of that particularly that kind of nature. I go into problem solving mode.
right.
I'm sure you've probably been there yourself,
All too often.
where now I've, you know, so that with my mum, it was now I've got to sort out things that immediately affect her estate. I've got to speak to companies and I've got to speak to local authorities and these things to let them know what's going on,
Yeah,
and then find out what they then need us to do in that
mm,
circumstance to settle my mum's affairs one way or
mhm,
the other. It was in that case. We then went to my friend's house and then came back home, and it was only after we got home, so 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, had been a hell of a day. That I put a song on to react to, well, watching a reaction to, and it's a very powerful, emotional filled song anyway. It's a song called "The Poet and the Pendulum." I'll go into it in a second.
Mhm.
And that broke me. That's when I went, and my partner's come running through the because we live in a single bedroom flat. She's come running down the corridor and threw her arms around me and didn't let go until I calmed down. But she never said anything that I can remember. So, you know, so that was just
Mhm.
another example of this woman knowing what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And I think it probably stems from having a loving relationship with her father, to be quite honest with you. And it's something that's been lost with the degradation of fatherhood. Um, in terms of the song, people want to go and listen to it. It was written shortly after the band had sacked the original lead singer. It was a big thing in their native Finland because they are the biggest band in Finland. And the composer, and he is a composer, suffered all kinds of backlash and everything else to the
Mhm.
point where he thought about ending his life,
Yeah,
taking us back to the mental health thing. And basically, he wrote the song so that he wouldn't kill himself, and he killed himself in the song.
yeah.
So you can see where the power is in that piece of music.
Um,
And there's a part of it where there's like a storm in the background. It's
mhm.
a part called the Pacific, and the storm in the background, the sound of the storm in the background is the is a man's anguished cry if you listen to it. And you know, Finnish men apparently are renowned for their sort of stoicism and what have you.
Mhm.
And but you listen to this guy's music and all of it is incredibly powerful and emotional very often. Some of it's just good, plain old and good fun. Some of it's just very, very powerful and emotional.
Yeah.
And so, and this is another way see men deal with their emotions is by writing something, whether it be a letter, a song, a poem, building something. Men, we've said this before, haven't we? Men
Mhm.
tend to heal by doing, not necessarily speaking.
Right.
But then the
Right.
act of speaking could be seen as an act of doing something.
Very often it's doing something else, though.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah. Well,
So if anyone wants to know the name of the song that made me break down the day my mother died, it's called The Poet and the Pendulum, and it's by a band called Nightwish. I would highly recommend people go and listen to it.
right. I'll
Also, a
link.
song called "How's the Heart" off one of the latest albums, which is a call to human empathy.
What's it called?
How's the Heart?
Well, I'll link them in the description so
Hmm.
people can
Yeah,
go listen.
yeah, they're potent to say the least.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think maybe this is a good place to wrap things up, unless you had anything else.
Um, Not that I can really think of. No,
Well, thank you very much, Jed Duck.
no
That,
problems. Pleasure as
that
always.
yeah, that last bit was really good to hear. Thank you very much for that.
No worries.
And thanks everyone for listening. Um, and we will see you again next time. Stay tuned. And thanks very much for joining. Have a good one.
All right.
Bye.